live. See it preparing, so hopefully it'll broadcast us there. And when I see it, we will.
You have a preference for Matt or Matthew?
Either way is fine.
Cool.
All right. Yeah, perfect. Okay, we're all set. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. If you want to support this show, please go over to mattbelair.com and become a member for exclusive content, for also backed up episodes and the episodes I can't share on YouTube. But the best thing you can do to support this show is to do 3 kind acts wherever you are in the world today. Today's guest is an author, philosopher, and liberal arts enthusiast, helping people pursue a self-taught education in critical thinking using the ancient philosophy of the Trivium. His latest book, Restoring Reason, using ancient liberal arts to defend against modern manipulation, demonstrates examples that can improve at least 4 areas of your life by applying these principles. Welcome to the show, Dr. Travis Corcoran.
Thank you, Matthew. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And by the way, I am really looking forward to this. You do so many podcasts when you do a book, but our little pre-chat before has already got me kind of like excited just to have a discussion with like-minded person who's like equally curious about everything.
Oh man, well, yeah, I'm excited about this too. You know, I really shortened the bio there. Your book seems amazing and it's perfect for the times. You go into the Trivium, which I'm excited to have a guest on because everyone that's dove in deep into that subject has spoke so highly of it, and I have yet to do so. So I'm excited for you to chat about that and your book and everything you're working on. But do you want to give us a little background about your life journey to what brought you to writing that book and the work you're doing today?
I'll keep it brief, man, because I'm really excited to talk with you, to be honest. I got some other things to bring up that you might shed some light on. But in short, what got me to write this book, I have a pretty diverse, my education kind of went all over the place. I was very lucky in that way. Of course, it didn't make much sense to my parents, like, why are you studying, getting a degree in philosophy, or you study this or that? Doctorate in chiropractic and philosophy, or doctorate in chiropractic. I also studied nuclear engineering in the Navy. So it's kind of all over the place: healthcare, math, physics, philosophy, and I minored in biology. So I'm just interested in everything. My biggest interest is, I think a lot like you, I want to understand things. I feel good when I get an understanding. And I know that that's what people love. People want certainty. And that I think sometimes they too quickly settle on a belief that they don't validate and just carry on with that. And then they defend it with their ego. I like an actual true understanding that conforms to reason. And so that's my background. What got me to write the book was, you may have heard of it, like there was a small little lockdown a couple of years ago or a while back. And watching the rhetoric back and forth and the understanding, and censorship is at an all-time high, censorship from high levels. It really got me thinking that now's the time to, I would like to see reason restored to discussions, that people don't have to be censored just because there's a disagreement, which to me, censorship is an admission that you can't defend your point, that you just rather cut the other person's tongue out. And so, I've been studying this stuff for a long time. The Trivium's been a big hobby and interest of mine. And it was only recently, it was like, this has got to go to other people. For too long, I've been recommending, you probably know the book, actually. I've been recommending this book, Matthew, to a lot of people, The Trivium from Sister Miriam Joseph. And
I'm going to check that out.
You should, man. It is one of the best books. It's probably one of my favorite books. And the thing is, the material is so powerful if you can really understand it. But a lot of people just don't find it very sexy because it reads like a kind of a textbook. And because I think our mind has been so distracted and, I don't know, I want to say like maybe trained to be short-sighted. So when you look at this material, it's difficult for people today to understand how far-reaching an understanding of your mind, what it can do for you. And so I wrote a book that kind of summarized, like, it's not, her book is quite, I mean, this is very dry material, but it's very powerful. She never really gets into, she goes through those first three of the seven liberal arts very thoroughly. However, the people I'm recommending it to, they want, like most people, what's in it for me? What do I get? And so I just summarized those so that they get a synopsis of the trivium, or those first three liberal arts, and then went more into why it would be appropriate for you, what it can do for you, how it would be of value to your life, and things you should watch out for that you've taken possibly as replacements for understanding. And that's what really motivated me to write that book. I want everyone to have this, what I would call a superpower, because certainly there's a class of people that they do study this. If you're familiar with John Taylor Gatto's work, which I'm certain you are, he makes it very clear that, like, upper echelon 0.0001%, this is their entire education. What they do is simply read, write, and debate, and then read, write, and debate again and again and again. Why? Because reading is the best way. That's like embraces the first liberal art. Reading is one of the best ways to acquire knowledge, because you do it without someone else's voice or influence. It's in your own voice. You can be more creative as you're acquiring the knowledge, right? You're free. And then they read, write, and debate. Write is the best way to really express the second liberal art, because you have to structure your statements and arguments and claims in a way that conforms to reason if you want them to have any weight or be true. And then debate is the best way to practice the third liberal art, your rhetorical skills or wisdom, how well you express that knowledge and understanding. And that's why they're masters this. And those first three liberal arts deal with the quality of mind. The last four of the seven classical liberal arts, those deal more with quantity of the environment that the mind finds itself in. So if there was one thing that I think people would benefit most from, is cultivating and nurturing and exercising the quality of your mind. Because if you're not doing it, just like your body, right? If you don't exercise, it begins to atrophy. It's not as of much value. But when you nurture it, exercise it, cultivate it, it becomes of more value. And so the reasoning is, if we logically played this out, most people want a higher quality of life. And so what they do is buy all these superficial cosmetic things that they think will make their life better, instead of this understanding that the quality of your life is 100% dependent on the quality of your actions and decisions. And those decisions, the quality of your decisions depends on the quality of your mind and the ability to think clearly and not be enslaved by your emotions or be manipulated and leveraged and pushed around. That's a huge long answer of why I wrote the book, but
well, I love it, and it's a great response to what you observed going on, and it gives people a practical tool. So, you talk about defending against manipulation. Well, you're correct. Where we're being conditioned, we're being trained to be very short-sighted, trained to be unhealthy, trained to just only process intellect from authority, which is like rote memorization.
Yeah.
And I've looked at the work of I think John Taylor Gatto, is that his full name?
Yeah.
He spoke about it highly. And now, with my wife being a teacher, seeing what's been going on the last few years, and it's not like we're accelerating and growing. It's almost this opposite. What's a proper word for that? De-evolution? Is that even
like
work?
retro, like we're in retrograde.
Yeah, we're like atrophying, right? We're not growing. We're going in the opposite direction you'd think we'd be going. And so the other thing is too about manipulation, their ability to do it. Like back in the day, there's a great documentary called Century of Self about Edward Bernays, and this talked about him, using all these psychological tools on the masses to manipulate for a variety of different things. And so when we don't understand that that's being used against us, we don't know how to defend against it. When I learned hypnosis, they would say, don't share this with everybody, because if everybody knows, it's not going to work. And
Yeah.
I can hear it in advertises. I see it in the media. And when you're getting fully bombarded all day, every day from everywhere, and you're not even recognizing that this is influencing you, that it can be potentially manipulating you in ways that you wouldn't want to do,
Right.
then you're not going to be able to defend against it. So, this Trivium is absolutely the answer. And what I've been suggesting for a long time is people just look at the basics of neuro-linguistic programming, because it goes into some of those language patterns that you hear. And once you hear it, oh, okay, they want me to make this decision. Is this a decision that I want to make for myself? Because otherwise, you're not going to be aware it's happening, and you're going to be a lot more susceptible to that influence. Just like in the same way for mixed martial arts, if I know how to put an arm bar on you, or all these different moves, you're basically toast if I grab you with my hands. But if you know what I'm doing, you're perfectly fine. So knowledge is definitely power. So I'd love for you to share a little bit, either comment on that or go into a little bit of this synopsis of Trivium, because I think you did that, but I think there's a few more parts.
Yeah, well, we're going to be on for a while, but I want to say, man, thank you. It's so refreshing to hear someone like do this. I do that same thing. I love relating this like mental aspect or psychological to physiological, and what you said about the example with the mixed martial arts or armbar. And like I talked about at the beginning, everyone feels better when they have a little bit of certainty. They feel safe. And like someone who's highly skilled at, say, martial arts, they certainly feel more confident and safe in more environments than someone who's not well trained. And now we live in a very, very intellectual environment, or us say mental environment, and there are mental predators everywhere. And what you said too, the attack is, I also agree with this. I'm glad you brought it up. The attack is from everywhere, all angles, all institutions, that we're not even conscious of it anymore. It's like sub-threshold. And so you wouldn't even think, like you said, you're just toast. Yeah. And most people seem to be okay with that, because that same system that's dumbing them down has given them all these reassurances that someone will be there to protect them. I also love that you addressed appeal to authority. That is one of that's just simply, it's like admission. I can't think for myself. I need an expert. Yeah, but what capacity of mind do these experts have that I don't have? I simply need the same knowledge they have, basically like input, and that would be like the first liberal art. So I'll try and combine this with a synopsis like you asked for the liberal arts. But that first liberal art, knowledge, or a ledger of what we know, is just data, it's input. And that can be acquired, mostly it's empirically acquired when you're born into the world. It's only experiences, 5 senses. It's very much empirical data. And then the baby from birth till 7 or 9 years of age, it is just tagging like labels to these things. Like, oh, this sensation is hunger. That person is daddy, right? And so you're just building a knowledge base or a database. So who is an expert? An expert, maybe they have a bit more of a knowledge base than you. However, this like, I don't know, belief or faith that knowledge is correct is very dangerous, right? Because knowledge can be, you and I could have a lot of knowledge, but what if all that knowledge was incorrect? We still have a lot of knowledge. The quantity is huge. Oh, I have all this knowledge. But what about the quality? Is it correct? That's what that first liberal art's all about. And the second liberal art, this is where the real, in my opinion, this is my opinion, is logic. The second liberal art, that's where the real power is, because this is a systematic, reliable, stable means of checking claims or arguments. It's a series of statements and how those statements are structured. Are the premises true? Do they contradict one another? Are they consistent? Are they relevant? Right? And that is where, to me, like it seems in the world, an expert is simply someone who's rote memorization, they high grades, blah, blah, blah. They just have a lot of knowledge and they've demonstrated it. To me, someone I trust is someone who can process that information. And that's what the second liberal art is, processing. So if we put it in millennial terms, it'd be First liberal art input, second processing, and then the third is output, or as it's traditionally called, wisdom or rhetoric. And that, unfortunately, is not really concerned with being correct or being true. Rhetoric is concerned with effectiveness. And we have a lot of politicians who are very effective. We have journalists who are effective. They are effective at what they express or communicate. And that's very dangerous when what they express or communicate is either incorrect or untrue. And it seems like that's the case more often than not when I'm listening to any legacy media journalist or some Hollywood person giving me their opinion, or a politician enforcing policies. And then anyone that disputes it and disputes it with reason that conforms, it's valid, deductively valid or inductively strong. No, but it's a disagreement with the authority, so that gets censored. So rhetoric is, I think it's really important. I just wish more people, like, this is why I work on it, myself and yourself. It's important for us. If the knowledge we have is correct and true, and it benefits humanity, then the better we get at communicating that, and the better the people we communicate to, we can pass that on. Then we have a much better chance to stand up to this, I would say, malicious narrative that doesn't really have our best interest at heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would be great if everybody wanted this kind of education. What I noticed from the beginning of this and doing research a long time, and then when this started, is that nobody was interested in a discussion. Of the 2 years that went on, there was no discussion. There was no value or respect from the other side. And they were definitely not using the Trivium, because you need, to test your theory through conversation and debate to see if it holds up, to see if it's valuable. Because if you give me a new piece of information that makes everything that I just thought was invalid, then that's great, because I've learned something. I apply something similar. I wonder if you've ever heard of this, called the formula for truth. And my guests or listeners have heard of this many times, but the idea is like, there's two polar opposites, right? God is real, God isn't real. Flat earth, round earth. COVID is the deadliest thing of all time, or it's not so. So whatever, it's the polar opposite. We got X and Y axis and a 0 and 90. Well, when you are conversing with somebody, if you're already, you already have your worldview, you already have your information. And so most people are just looking to protect their 45 degrees of information, if you imagine it on two sides, rather than seeking understanding from the other individual. So when you seek understanding, you open up to 45 degrees of information to their entire worldview. And maybe at like 98 degrees, you get a little speck, right? And you're like, oh, you know what? That is valid. Okay, I learned that. And when you do that with every single person you meet, you're going to see the quality of information, right? Because they're just, they're deflecting, they're using logical fallacies. It's like, that's not a very strong argument. It's not a very persuasive argument. Then you go to the other side, and somebody is, can provide references, is very persuasive, has, examples. And I see this in the martial arts all the time, where MMA has kind of been the proving ground for this. Is like, okay, we would test something, but will it work if I'm out in the real world and somebody does not want me to do that? Some of these, Steven Seagal flashy throws and stuff like that. Well, is this going to work when I'm out there? Because if it doesn't, and somebody resists that, and all of a sudden, I'm on the ground getting my butt kicked, it was great in theory, and maybe it's even fun in practice when the person participates, but in the real world application, will it work? And that's what the UFC figured out. What was the most practical and effective tool? Now we're in the mindset, it's defending the ego. And many people aren't ready to let go of their worldview.
Oh, right? Man, 100%. I love what you're saying. We are like soulmates, bro. I got to say, I love what you're talking about right now. I like that though. About the testing ground. And again, the reference you're making to something physical. And I always try to give physical examples, because when we're discussing, as you probably know, you're talking about the mind. It's a non-local phenomenon. It's not a physical thing. The brain is, but the mind it's not physical. So it's difficult for people to really understand at times. But it does have an anatomy. It does have components like ego, memory, archetype, subconscious, conscious. And it, just like the physical body has anatomy, heart, lungs, muscles, and they all work together. And you have these parts and they have functions. The physical body has parts and functions, and the mental part has parts and functions. And so I always talk just like you did. And it's interesting, UFC, very much so. They put, this was the testing ground, right? But you also brought up something I've been talking about lately too. And that is, and I talk about in the book too, is that one of the things, or one of the hurdles, obstacles that keeps us from cultivating and nurturing our mind is, and luckily this doesn't happen physiologically, but in the mind, we get distracted. We replace thought with emotion. And it was what you're saying, is like these emotions and these biases. Besides appeal to authority, which we've already addressed, appeal to emotion has got to be one of the most powerful weapons against us. And people have been convinced the conviction bias, if they feel strongly enough about something, that's enough, it's true. And they'll defend that conviction and not really check it out. I love that example you're saying about I say this all the time. I just told one of my associates, like, it's the same answer from me all the time. If you're asking me to solve a problem and what the answer to a problem is, it'll always be understanding. That's where it's going to come from, right? But more to the testing ground in this battle arena, dude, I think you're going to like this, Matthew. For me, this is an example of society right now. Someone showed me one of these shows. It was like battle bots, I think, or something. I can't remember. But they had
is
like,
that when the robots go and fight each other and the sort of, I love that.
Okay, I'd never seen this. I thought it was so interesting. I'm glad. Good, we have a frame of reference. I'd never seen this, but I was fascinated because you had two teams of engineers, and I don't know if it's coincidence, they're wearing red shirts and blue shirts. So very, like, you can see this political thing already, like an allusion to that. They're not in the ring themselves. They're controlling what's in the ring, and what they've put in the ring, each team, they've each put in a concept, an engineering design concept. And basically they're going to combat. And what we're going to find is, well, what happened was they fight and there's a win, and the losers mope around and the winners celebrate their trophy. And all the focus was about this emotional win-loss, and everything was about the trophy or the reward, this material reward, and this ego and pride. And I'm watching this going, this is like the perfect, how do I say, like metaphor for society, because what we should be doing is you put two engineering concepts in there, and we've basically seen which one is the superior concept, the superior engineering design. And so both teams should really be celebrating. Hey, we both put I wasn't in the ring. I put a concept forward, and the weaknesses were revealed. Yes, no, boo hoo hoo, emotions come over. Instead of celebrating, both teams now have a greater understanding of which concept is superior. Imagine it was ideologies politically. Okay, which one is superior? Which one stands up to the rigor, the intellectual rigor, or which one conforms to reason, is deductively valid, passes all the tests, and then both teams are the winner because both are the wiser for it. But we've lost respect for understanding, and we now like go for the gold, or and that's what when you were bringing up the UFC, I was like, God, that is just like that, man. And
well, that's a great comment. I had Joyce Anastasia on yesterday, and she helped me redefine competition, which I was aware of through martial arts. So she said the original meaning of competition is a rivalry where two or more parties strive for a common goal which cannot be shared. So you're getting better. In martial arts, we see it as iron sharpens iron. And you look at the Olympics and you see one country kicking your butt, and you think, how did they do that? Everybody gets better together. And the reason why I wrote Zen Athlete years ago was I thought there was a way to influence kids very powerfully through sport, teaching them peak performance and mindset tools under the guise of sport because they'd want to get better. But one of the big ideas from that is, like, when you go to children's sports, it should be about bringing communities together, bringing teams together. So, let's say LeBron James misses the game-winning shot and he's whole, happy, and complete in who he is. Then he invites the other team over for a barbecue in their city. It's like, yeah, you want to win and you're going to be disappointed when you give everything to it. But again, you see this in the UFC as well. And that's why I like the champions who, hold that martial arts honor. It is about growth, within the self, but how do we bring that in community? And when you're traveling and doing games as kids, it's not about crushing the other town, the other city. And so how do you join that city together? How do you make more friends, connect to your community? That's what sport can do. But competition can really rise your capabilities and stretch you because somebody's figured out a way to get better. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think the other thing I want to bring up was just the idea of, this logic is being replaced with scientism, right? It's just like, you don't question the white coat. You don't go through your logic. And then the final point I wanted to bring up, I think is very important. When we look at persuasion and hypnosis and getting people to take an action, you are not using logic. Whenever you're using sales, you're using emotion. Whenever you're using persuasion, it's always emotional. So when you bring up the logic, it's like it has no power. It has to almost be a choice to go into logic, to go into reason. And if people are set on emotion, it's hard to bring them back down. It has to be a quality of character or person to be even open to that, which can be really frustrating in these times.
100%, man. I love it. That's one thing I just can't get over too, is this. There's a lot of people that are confused. They think that because they have these emotions, that they're actually conducting active thought. But emotions are reactive. They're automatic, which it makes sense, is why Edward Bernays and any marketer, politician, whatever. I mean, if I want to manipulate your mind or influence you in some way, the shortcut and easiest way is really to approach you on some emotional level, either like make you afraid of something, or if I want to elicit a reaction, get you angry, or if I want to sell you something, hey man, I really love that background, whatever, compliment. Emotion is the quickest way to really get real estate in someone's mind. And you've been talking a lot about hypnotism, NLP. Man, I really recommend people read into that stuff. I don't practice those things, but I've read extensively on those so that I can be defended against it when I hear it. I know what's being thrown at me, right? I know when to step back. And I wish more people would do that, because they really are. I don't want to say, I used to say this all the time, Matthew. I was like, oh, people are so ruled by emotion. But the truth is, they're ruled by the people eliciting their emotion, right? It's the ideologies, institutions, and individuals that elicit their emotion that are controlling them. And the only way to really fight back or defend yourself is to develop this, like, and just, I'm sure just like MMA, these skills, they don't come overnight, right? You're not going to read some like, here's the 5 quick steps or the 10 ancient secrets, and like Monday morning, you're like intellectually bulletproof. That's not the case. It takes development, and people don't understand emotions. And that's why I called the book Restoring Reason. It's not, I want to replace emotions. That's impossible. Emotions are automatic, and I'm glad we have them, but they are reactionary. Emotional reactions, thoughtful responses. And you said a big word there. You said, thinking is a choice. It's a choice. People have to choose this. To have an emotional reaction, there is no choice. You just have it. The only choice you have is how well you can mitigate or manage it afterwards. And that comes on back to understanding. Do you understand why you had it, how it was elicited, why it's coming up, right? Only until people can figure out these are 2 different things. Thoughts and emotions are not the same thing. They have different functions. They're both important, but it's like heart and lungs. They're not the same thing. It's 2 physical components, but they have different function. Just because they're both physical doesn't mean they're the same. And so many people in our world today really think thought and emotion, they conflate the 2. They can't distinguish them apart, but they are definitely different with different functions, just different mental components.
Yeah, absolutely. And during these last couple of years, I've never really paid attention to politics except for recently, and I don't like them. But you can see there's been no debate. There's been no debate anywhere with anything. And the reason being, if there was one side would get decimated. It just, you can pick through just the fraud and the manipulation and the coercion so quick with somebody who is knowledgeable and who can answer the questions in a very logical, reasonable way that can be verified. There has been absolutely no debate on any of this, since the beginning. And so I'm curious your suggestion for, the individual. I think there's been a lot of us out there who have been doing the research, who want to figure out solutions to what's going on, who see, hey, well, if we implement this, this is going to harm a certain set of people, and your reasoning for doing that is not sound and it's
Yeah.
not logical, and I'm the one getting harmed.
Yeah.
So, it would be nice to have them at the table. It's almost, how do you defend against the emotional, angry mob? You're sitting there kind of defending, you're open to a conversation where it's likely if they could open their minds, open their hearts, and just listen for a second, they could find the reason, but they're not choosing to because the emotional is almost taken over. And that seems to be one of the viruses, is this emotional virus. And that's how people end up doing things that they wouldn't normally do. Is they're set on emotion. They're not thinking it through, and they haven't really processed what's going on. They're just reactive.
Yeah. And some of them don't want, to because, well, first, the mob, there's not much you can do against the mob. Our only hope is really on an individual basis, because once mob mentality takes over, you're not talking to a person. You're trying to communicate with a collective that has lost their mind and refuses logic and reason. And that's impossible. They feel strong because they have numbers, which they don't understand. The strength is in the actual argument or the claim and the reasoning behind it.
And you can observe the mob mentality in the individual that you're speaking with. If you open up, I've seen it over and over, where either a piece of propaganda will come in or the mob mentality answer comes in where there's no logic. It's a logical fallacy. And it's interesting because it just comes out of left field, and it's like, oh, that's been planted in the ether for them to just say, but they can't defend it. Right. And so
they've been given all their, it's like in movies and sitcoms and all that stuff, they do it very subtly. They provide you with all the like quirky like responses, or I would say replies, that deflects. I'm not going to answer. I'm just going to brush you off. Honestly, it's really fight or flight. Some people, their mind is so weak, they never really want to cultivate it. They're just so into their emotions that it creates, the moment they hear something that contradicts their belief, correct or incorrect, true or false, the moment they hear something that contradicts it, if they're not a strong thinker, calm and rational, it immediately creates a sympathetic stress response. And when sympathetic stress response goes up, it's either fight or flight. And most people, it depends on that individual. I know a lot of people, they just want to avoid it. So they've developed a lot of mechanisms to avoid it. It's like, hey, Matthew, just do your own research. Oh, you're not educated. I just want to dismiss you. I want to be dismissive of you and not attack you. The other side, the fight response is, you're a bigot or whatever, any of the phobes or Nazi, everyone, you disagree with me, you're a Nazi, right? Like, begin attacking the person. And when it gets
Trudeau, sorry to get you up, but I remember with the trucker convoy, because I went down for that, and I wanted to see, and Trudeau literally called everybody there, all of them. He didn't leave one. He literally called all of them, and I was there in real time, and it was like Canada Day mixed like with the festival and Burning Man. So nice, the friendliest people, just asking, all just kindness, compassion. It was a wonderful time. I observed that in real life, and a friend of mine is arguing with me on Twitter about what it was without even being there. You just see this like huge discrepancy of knowledge, right? Because they're just so fed into what's going on.
Yeah, man, it's that Trudeau. Oh my God, dude, what a case! That guy's a great case study in deception and manipulation. But there's back to that mob and why they're so powerful. It's like again, I'll do the same thing. We keep going with this theme of like physical and psychological. So just like there are people that have physical addiction to drugs or chemicals, right? They're really addicted to something physically. Mentally, it's the same thing. And when people get outraged, right, or angry, like the angry mob, anger like gives you energy, like your blood pressure goes up. You can get addicted to that feeling, right? So people seek that. That's why right now, I'm sure you see it too. Even in the absence of like victims and oppressors, this angry mob will create victims and oppressors because they need the hit. They need to be the hero. They need that I got to be outraged and angered, because it creates a certain internal chemistry or environment that's very addictive, right? There's just something about that fear and anger. Like create all these like endorphins in your body, where for you and I, you see like the more logical side, we don't have a big voice. We're not like outraged. The feelings we get are not so much fear and anger, but which give people energy. What we experience is more likely disappointment and frustration, which it lowers your energy. Right. But that's where we started anyway, with calm and collective. And then when you observe these things, oh, that's frustrating. That's disappointing. Yeah, we don't get these hits of endorphins that keep us, I don't want to say that we've lost our minds. I want to insult the other side, but when your mind is no longer an individual one, but part of this mob mentality or a collective, you really have lost it.
Yeah, it's giving your mind over to the Borg kind of idea, right? Rather than being an independent critical thinker, because you give it over to authority, right? Oh, well, they do my thinking. It started with, well, you're not a doctor, so you don't know anything, but I can look at the statistics and use my own, critical factors to look at a variety of different things and take everyone's opinion and see, okay, great, you're saying this. Can you prove it? Right. So can you show me the actual numbers? And then there's the idea that like, okay, you've got the mob mentality, but when you're just like giving every decision to something else rather than looking at it, analyzing it in your own brain and coming up with an answer. But the problem is it gets bigger and bigger, broader and broader. So you don't look at anything, at all. Right. Anyone that I had a debate with during this entire time, they didn't know how the PCR test functioned or who invented it. Not one person. Everybody on the other side who knows exactly who invented it, what he said about it, knows how it works. And so you have knowledge there, you have understanding there, you have reason there, and it can be incredibly challenging. And I'm curious from your perspective, as you see this, mob grow in the last couple of years, and you can see it in the politics where I also hosted a law summit. And what I learned is that they will never answer a question. The more corrupt the person is, they will never answer a question because it creates a liability. So if you look at the Canadian politics, it's an absolute joke. No question is ever answered because they're deflecting everything and they're just railroading an agenda. And if you don't like it, then you're a racist, homophobe, all of those things going on. You have to be a biologist now to know the difference between a man or a woman. That's in 2022, all of a sudden, right? And so I was like, oh, geez, like, I got to go to school for 6 years to know, Dave Chappelle said it best. He goes, every person here passed through the legs of a woman. Now your identity and all that kind of stuff that they're bringing into it, it just muddies the water to kind of get back to clarity and understanding and also compassion too. But we need to have an open conversation, and there needs to be another side that's able to speak. But like you said, is that famous quote, you don't stop a man by, I don't know, cutting off his tongue. That one.
Cutting out his tongue.
Yeah, so there's so that one, it's like in a debate, right? It's like, well, you can't rebut, so you cut out his tongue. It doesn't mean you win. And that's what's been happening here. And we want to restore that so that, if a person has a preference to do certain things, they're able to have those preferences. If you have a different preference, you're allowed to have that preference. That's what freedom is, but we're not in that trajectory. We're actually in the opposite. You start to control the thoughts, what people can say, and then we're moving into 1984 Orwellian, where it's literally upside down world. 2 + 2 is 5. And not only are they not satisfied with you saying it's 5, you have to believe it. And that's why that movie and that book are so dark, because it's like, no. You know what I mean? You better believe it. You can't just say it. You have to believe it. And if people think that's not possible, it is. And if you get into weird stuff with MK Ultra and stuff like that, how amazing we can be manipulated through all the variety of factors is extraordinary. But I am optimistic at coming back to our power and knowing that kind of influence and mob mentality isn't going to be the overarching thing, because that's not who we naturally are. I think we're more compassionate, we're more wise, we're more caring. But once you instill fear and the emotional side, all of that stuff kind of goes out of the window and it takes a back seat.
Agreed, man. And you hit on quite a few things there, man. There's so much I want to comment on. We have to do this again, to be honest. But I have hope too. And one of I heard this, you probably have too, that is that if there was no hope, or it was all like it's done, right? There's no chance, then there wouldn't be such an incredible necessity for all this propaganda. If there was no hope and we could just all just throw in the towel, then there wouldn't be the necessity for all this constant propaganda. The co-op of every single major institution that takes up a good percentage of the real estate in our mind, every one of them's been co-opted, and they are all pushing the same thing, and they have to keep doing it. The way I see it is like, I really look to nature for a lot of answers, because nature's never messed up. It has no prejudice. It's always seeking balance. That's what nature does. It has one direction. So if I put like a basketball, football, soccer ball, I push it under the water to keep it there. That's unnatural. It would float on the surface. But to keep it there, you have to keep pressure on it. You have to keep exerting energy. And that's just what is happening now, I think. Intellectually, they have to keep the pressure on, because if they even let up for a moment, humanity will just, boom, come right to the surface. We'll come right into balance. It's like this zeitgeist has to have constant energy put into it to maintain it. They can't let up for a moment.
I love that. That's the best analogy I have heard so far about what's going on. And I've heard that before about the propaganda and the clamping down and just using every tool that they have to make this work. And so that's a really just a very beautiful example. I've looked up the quote while you're speaking there. It says, when you tear out a man's tongue, you are not proving him a liar. You're only telling the world that you fear what he might say. And that's from George R. Martin. And I feel like there's a few similar ones to that. And so as it seems to be this polarization, and it is, yeah, the idea of like giving your mind over willfully, and how far will that lead you? How far will you go before you decide to think for yourself? It's that old analogy. If your friends jump off a bridge, would you do it too? Well, that's the same mob mentality. People aren't taking accountability for their own research, their own critical thinking. They're just kind of going along because they want the world to go where it was. They want it to go back to normal, and they're willing to participate, but they also can't imagine people have nefarious intent. And so as your research help people really understand, like making peace in some capacity with nefarious intent, that's one that I continue to struggle with. I think, why am I human? And, I'm here, and a man, I don't know, human is apparently hue of a man if you go into the law dictionary. But why am I a man on this earth witnessing so much suffering? We got all of these genocides. None of this makes sense. I don't think that people are naturally like this. What the flying F is going on? And how do I not be heartbroken when I'm observing the harm? And it really irritates me and makes me, infuriated when I see someone architecting it and then the harm come out. Right, especially when it's on children and other things, and it takes me a while to make peace with it. And so I'm just curious your view on this kind of sliding scale of what's going on here.
To be really honest, Matt, I struggle with that too. Like these malevolent individuals, who most of them remain pretty hidden. I think a lot of the people we see are just like really puppets, to be honest. But I often think what's right. Because all the gurus and spiritual gurus, I talk a little bit about that in the book too, that we need to be careful of all of them as well. Not that there's good elements in there, but I struggle with that too. Like what's right? What's the best way to approach these nefarious or malevolent people? How did it get that way? How did they get? My current idea is, and I'm always open to changing, I just need reason, right? But currently my thoughts are, it comes from the most absolute, like an absolute insecurity. I can't think of any other reason that you would want to have so much control, power, and influence other than to be completely insulated from damage or harm or whatever. And that's all I can think. I don't know. That's just where my conjecture goes now, is that it's a deep, deep and profound insecurity. And that's why they just can't stand an opposing voice. They can't stand anything that's in their way. And that the more, I don't want to say not even money, but money, power, influence, protection, just to be completely insulated, living in another world where they have nothing to fear. I think it is all driven by insecurity. I don't know, but I'm plagued with those same questions that you have, and like I think about those a lot, really. Or something else you're
Yeah.
talking to. I'd love to mention this.
Yeah, go ahead.
So talking about quotes and what you were saying, like you and I, like you were saying earlier, people really need to make the choice and think for themselves and apply reason and logic and not just be going to this belief system or scientism, which is like just another religion, just uses technical words, I suppose. But it's really belief and faith, right? And you're just believing what the collective says, or maybe social conformity, appeal to authority, whatever it is. But you have not drawn the conclusion yourself. So that's not to say that's what it was. You said something about individual choices, individual thoughts. Well, the thing is, too, some people get so confused that they think, well, if Matthew and Travis, we have the same conclusion, the same thoughts about something, that suddenly we're a collective and can't think for ourselves. But it's very possible a lot of people come to an agreement on something. What makes them an individual is not everyone has to have their own unique opinion about what 2 + 2 is or how to handle some political problem. What's important is not that we have these different ideas to be individual, but that we all drew them through our own understanding. And that reminds me, like my favorite quote from Mikhail Bakunin. He's a Russian philosopher and political critic. I think I can do this pretty good, but he says, the liberty of man consists solely in this, that he himself understands the laws of nature, not because they were given to him or imposed upon him by an external will, mortal or divine, individual or collective. And that is at the crux of everything. That's when you know you're an individual. The liberty of man, of one man, his liberty, his freedom, it all rests on that you understand, that I understand. The collective believes, and you and I can draw the same conclusion, but I'm only free. I only have liberty and intellectual freedom when I've drawn the conclusion myself, not because someone drew it for me, which is what you were referring to earlier, this appeal to authority. Hey, the experts arrived from the religion of scientism and they've bestowed upon us their dogma. Okay, now I have an understanding. No, you do not. It's only when you go through the intellectual rigor yourself, you've laid out the premises and the argument, you understand them, you've drawn the conclusion, you know how the operators of logic work, just like I say this in the book too. You and I probably don't know a single scientist that's worth any value who doesn't understand arithmetic. Like you're a chemist, or a physicist, biologist, geologist. At the bare minimum, to apply the sciences, you must know arithmetic, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. So many people think they're logical. They think they have an understanding, yet they don't know the operators of logic: conjunction, disjunction, conditional, negation, right? Yet they'll sit there with you and they'll argue their belief system as if it's true and validated. But when they can't back it up, that's why they go immediately to cut your tongue out or censor you or deflect or dismiss, won't answer your questions, all the rhetorical tactics and strategies we've been talking about, or that Trudeau is the ultimate case study for, basically.
Yeah, in Canada, I've been telling people that we've had a management change. You're working at a store and you get a new manager, and that's horrible. Well, Canada has a new manager in dictatorship, and we're just getting the memo now through the actions, right? We have this illusion of a democracy, and I think the solutions are going to come from the people. And you're right about coming to the conclusions yourself. There's a huge difference between people believing the same thing and why they believe them. Right. There's a reason why all the people on the law summit that I hosted had the same beliefs, because they did the research and came to the same conclusions for themselves, where the individual is able to articulate that in a way that's going to hold up. It's going to have grounding. It's going to have a foundation. It's going to have reason and all those things within themselves. It's the idea of like maybe going out in nature and, reading some books and you know all these different things, but you go out and you haven't applied any of that knowledge and you don't know how to do it. You need to go a few times to say, okay, you know what, I can go out there with nothing and I can survive for 2 weeks because I know how to do it. There's a huge discrepancy from that understanding. But what the other side seems to be doing is like, okay, well, this guy's going to tell me how, and they're going to set up everything for me. There's my tent, and they want all the catering. It's kind of like at Burning Man, people would get upset when all the rich people will come, the mega rich, because they'd have like these mega camps and they get there and, you know, they got cars ready and everything. And like half of the thing they're saying, you're supposed to get there and you're supposed to get in the dirt, make it yourself, you know, contribute something, you know, not just come in at like a 5-star, all you can eat vacation. It's supposed to be a different experience. And they are, I'm not saying it's wrong the way they did it. I would be like that because it's a challenging place to be, but it's a very different experience and you're going to get different things. And so it's so important to just think for yourself and then test that. And that's what I learned from, you know, Bruce Lee in martial arts was he would say, well, one technique for a tall, slender man might not work for a short, stocky guy. You need to test that for yourself, right? Just because it works for them doesn't mean it's going to work for you. You have to express yourself in your own way. And in this life, we have to make our own path, our own wisdom, and try things out. And even if we fail, that's fine. It's not the end of the world, but we're gaining wisdom through our experience. And it seems like this collective hypnosis is just stuck in the mind, and they're stuck in this matrix, which is now literally going into a virtual reality world that people are participating in. It's becoming less and less in this physical, tangible, reasonable world that you can touch and feel and see and sense, into a fully, what do you call it? Like made up world.
Immersive, illusion, the
illusion, you know, a full on illusion, not even here. And I remember seeing this little video on YouTube where it's like a short skit, like a sci-fi, and a guy went through his life or whatever and was doing all these different things. And then at the end of it, he was like kind of at war, and it was a guy in the corner with like a VR headset on. That was basically, it was so dark. And I was like, oh goodness, like that's kind of where people are going. And actually, I want to bring up one more point, because when you're talking about the dopamine hit or all the chemicals that go on in the body, they're addictive. And I do think through TikTok and through Instagram and through all these programs we have, they're training us more and more to move towards these things. So when it's happening in any context in our life, we're getting that manipulation, that physical stimulus to go take an action we may or may not want to do. There's a reason why casinos are set up that way, slot machines are set up that way. And so this is really having a detrimental effect on our kids, which we don't even know the power it's going to have later, you know, on the population when they want to go for something.
Man, 100%. I love what you said about casinos and stuff. And we talked about this earlier. You're bringing up NLP and hypnosis. NLP especially, even if you're not practicing it, everyone should study that, man. The use of colors, sounds, words, story. Because the funny thing is, if you're not studying it, okay, that's your detriment. Because the people that have ideas to sell you or products to sell you that may not be in your best interest, they're studying it like crazy. They are very fluent in this language that's being used against you. And it's not, you don't have to, just because you're studying it doesn't mean you're going to be a bad person and misuse it, but you'd be a fool to not use it in order to defend yourself. I think it's just, personally, I think it's intellectually irresponsible. I love what you said about Bruce Lee too, that makes a great case for, and G. Edward Griffin does a great, discussion on this. You can probably find it on YouTube. It's just collectivism versus individualism. But what you're saying about Bruce Lee, how like, hey, what works for this tall, slender guy may not work for this. That's right. Everything's different per individual. You know, we always want to celebrate like individuality and creativity. Yet, how did so many tribes and collectives form? And that people now want to just buy their identity, buy their individuality. If I join this group, I'm virtuous, right? Because we stand against whatever. If I join this group, I'm a hero. I join this group. We want to be seen a certain way. And so the quickest way to do it, instead of actually being a virtuous person, instead of actually working on who you really are, you just join this group and then it's automatic, right? You're in, right? And maybe you just, I'm so afraid that people will see me as an oppressor, right? So I got to join this group. And It's all just manipulation. It's ridiculous. But this case, though, for individuality, what he's saying there is so true. This will not work on a tall, slender man, may work on that. That's why globalism is such a horrible, horrible thing. Like the smaller the smaller the governance gets, the better off we are, because then the more expression of individuality and the closer we can become to like this natural balance. Because what works in one nation or even province or city may not be appropriate in one that's in the middle of the desert, or one that's on the sea, or one that's along the river, or one that's high in the mountains. Why are we, all of us are not fit for one form of rule. In fact, I would say no humans are fit for rule or rulers. I mean, I think we're fit for natural law, to be honest.
Well, there's endless issues with global governance. The top ones that come to mind is that, the bigger the governance, the less accountability because they're so far away. The smaller the community. In your household, you're held responsible, right? I'm held responsible in my household. So, right, then in my little town, there can be more responsibility there being held to the people running it and seeing, okay, is this working for me? Is this going for the culture, right? So if you go to the mountains in British Columbia, Canada, there's a lot of outdoor activity and things like that. That's the culture and what people want to grow and express and do. People will support nurturing that and growing and like competing in these different ways to make the experiences in the life better. Right. But on the opposite, right, this full tyranny and the whole blanket is like, well, they don't like red. They want blue. They don't, right. Well, let the people who want blue navigate. Right. So you could live at the beach. You could live in the big city if you like. You can do all these different things. Every country is so different. Lifestyle is so different. People's beliefs and how they operate in the world, like their character. You'll notice in the cities, if you go, we had no more lockdown signs in Canada. The more you go to farming rural communities, the more they would have those signs up. The more you're in a city, the more they want to be in the matrix, but they like the city, but they also are missing some of this other stuff. And I feel like they shut the blinders to this nefarious intent. It couldn't be that bad. Right. I'm just doing my thing. It couldn't be that bad. I can't let any of that in. And so I see a lot of that out there. And I'd be curious your 2 cents if people are like, you can't focus on the bad and, it's too, I don't think that's Alex Sakaris wrote a book, Why Evil Matters, How Science and Religion Flubbed a Big One. And I feel like it's being aware of the intent, like you spoke about hypnosis. I was going through learning that for a couple of reasons. One, through sports performance, because I was curious about the power of the mind. So I want to use it on myself. But that's when I learned about persuasion and all these different language patterns and ways you could use and manipulate people. And then I would notice when people did it in, advertising and on TV and even movies are often one subtle advertisement, one subtle message in a whole movie that 99% of people totally miss. I'm like, that's what they were doing. That whole entire TV show or movie was for that one message that people totally missed because it came through story, which is the best form of hypnosis. There's a quote by Aristotle or someone that says, he who controls the narrative controls the people, or he who controls something along those lines. But story is incredibly powerful. So I'd be just curious your thoughts on just kind of taking the world as it is and then moving into an empowered space, because those who just say, no, it doesn't exist, they're doing things that are ending up harming them by staying in a state of ignorance.
That's what, again, solution is always going to be understanding how all this works. When you understand how your mind, so many people don't understand how their mind works. We have such an incredible understanding how our body works, like down to like the little tiny nephrons inside your kidney and down to that. We have specialists for that. As a nephrologist, that's like one component of the kidney, right? We know more and more about less and less. I love what you said about I say this all the time too, man. Dude, you and I can't imagine us sitting down and watching like just some normal blockbuster film. Like it would take a good 6 hours to get through an hour and a half film, because we'd be pausing and having to, do you see that? You see what they're doing there? You see how, right?
Yeah. Wife doesn't like to watch movies with me. I'll pause and be like, see that chemtrail there?
Yeah, those too. But little things too, this is what I've been noticing lately too. But first, let me address what you're saying, man, about the bigger governance gets, the less accountability. That's always going to be the case. And that's why government's always a failure. They have zero accountability. and a great hate the guy or like the guy. That Trump guy, he shined a light on a lot of stuff. He brought to the surface a lot of it. Was like humanity had to look in the mirror with this guy. And I thought it was like that showed me the face of humanity, because I really appreciated what he exposed. And that was just by being who he is. I've traveled to, I don't know how many countries now, like all over Southeast Asia, Japan, Brazil, South America. I've lived all over the US, been to Egypt, South Africa. I'm going back to Egypt again this September, all throughout Europe. And I can tell you, man, Matthew, I've never went anywhere in the world where, because I like to talk about politics and human nature. Never have I met someone go, oh yeah, man, our politicians are great. Love the politician. No, never. Every one of them, 100%, without exception, is like, we need to get, these guys are all crooked. They're all crooks. We need someone in there that's accountable. They all share that same thing. And then we get someone in there who's not a lifelong politician, a guy who's actually a business owner who understands like your household or a bit my business. I'm held accountable immediately by the market. Government has zero accountability, right? So you have all these like career politicians, 40, 50 years in politics. Then comes along some guy that has never even been on the city council, not even a mayor, governor, representative, Senate, nothing. Just boom, I'm the president. And the world hates him, unanimously hates the embodiment of the thing they wanted. And he gets replaced with one of the most career like someone who's been in politics for 50 years. People beg for one thing, get it. Well, no, let's just go back. It was kind of what you were saying earlier. They don't want to change. Let's give things back to the way they are, all because of some mean tweets or whatever. You know, I'm not like for or against Trump or any politician for that matter. He was almost like unanimously loved until he announced his presidency, and then he was unanimously hated. That illustrates the power, like Malcolm X said, that the media, the newspapers, they can have you like love your worst enemy and hate your best ally. It's freaking crazy, to be honest. I thought that was, for me, a good illustration of where humanity, they don't know what they want. They don't understand that, hey, this system's broke. It's okay. Someone comes along. We need something to fix it. Well, I don't like that. It's a change.
Yeah, I think the whole.
If my house. Go ahead, man.
I was going to say the whole system needs to change, right? I don't think we're going to get the solutions through government and politics. It needs to be a reimagining. The whole Trump thing, I remember when he got into office, I just laughed. I thought it was hilarious. I'm a Canadian. I didn't care. I was like, this is hilarious. Like, what does this mean? And unless you hated him, you're a racist. So if I don't say Trump is the worst guy ever, you hate, but you could see all the outright lies, and you look at Project Veritas and what they're exposing, but as a Canadian, when I look at the American system, it's the best system that I'm aware of in the world, because they have all these checks and balances to preserve their freedom, where a lot of other countries don't have that. A lot of countries in the past got disarmed and then massacred. And that's something that I, looked at as a kid. I didn't understand why we had war and starvation, which is why I learned about all of these kind of nefarious intent. I'm like, oh, they're architecting this. So what's the best system we have in place right now? It is the United States along the world, because they're the last nation in the world that can defend their own property, that can defend themselves. And so you're seeing this attempt at a global power. Well, you need to take out the pit bull. You need to take out the Mike Tyson, because they have all the tools. Even if we corrupt your government, and we have that, Canada's government's bought and paid for, many other governments are bought and paid for, you can come in and just take their things. Well, the problem with the United States is a lot of these guys have guns and they can protect themselves. So how do we just take their things, which we want to do? Well, we can crash the economy. We can do this and this. We can control all their media, which has been exposed for those who have eyes to see. And the solution, I feel like, is going to come at the community level with people like you and I, who are just standing in our own like honor and our own dignity and our own authenticity, willing to have a conversation, but not willing to bend the knee to something that we find to be egregious or wrong with our own internal world, then we're going to be moving to a different place. So
Yeah.
I feel like it's going to kind of split, and those who want to make that choice, they're willing to, but I don't have to make it. Right. It's like going out, like using an umbrella is like, your umbrella did not work unless I have one too. Like, the rain doesn't frighten me. I'm just going to go out there. Their logic is just so absurd. It's outrageous.
It's absent, to be honest. There is no logic behind it. I love what you said about America. It's here in Europe, man. This is a real tough discussion. Like, people don't like, there's such an aversion to guns. Like, the media is so successfully convinced everyone that like America's just a bunch of gun-toting lunatics. And what I think I hear this all the time, people anti-gun. You're not anti-gun, because if you were, you wouldn't want the government to have them either. What it is you're like specific on who gets the guns. So the very same governments who you like I said, everywhere I went in the world, everyone's like, all these politicians are crap, blah, blah, sort of. Yeah, but you're okay with them being protected by men with guns, and they give orders to the men with guns. You just don't want everyone else to have guns to defend themselves. That is how successful the media programming is, right? They're not, everyone thinks they're all anti-gun. You're not. You're just very selective on who gets the guns. And what's interesting is that the very institutions that they know are corrupt and need to be overhauled are the ones they're okay with having the guns. And so that's an astute observation, what you made about America. It's so true. That a lot of the people there have guns. I think Switzerland is very much the same. I think their government may even issue them guns at some point. Like,
really, I thought Switzerland was bad. Maybe they're good. I don't know.
Sweden.
I'm not European.
I think Sweden is pretty socialist, I would say. Like most of these other countries here, it's like, and to be honest, Matt, like, I am totally for like everyone being able to holster a weapon and carry a gun, or the freedom to. I don't carry a gun. I don't have a desire for a gun. I know I accept the responsibilities of not if everyone have one and I didn't, I accept those responsibilities. I'm just not into guns, never have been. But man, will I defend the right for people to have guns and carry guns so long as there are government agents carrying them around.
Yeah,
100%.
I think that's the big distinction. Oh, sorry, keep going. Finish your thought.
Yeah, it was because I was off track. I wanted to address exactly what you were saying. We really need to do this again. I'm going to introduce you.
Yeah.
There's another podcast I did that was very, like, it was super cool, just like yours. And I think if you two did a podcast together, it would be mind blowing, because he's also really cool, just like your style too. It's so organic, and we're just chatting. What you're saying, but like, I personally think if the whole system is overhauled, it doesn't have to be some violent revolution. Like what you said, just guys like us having a reasonable discussion, trying to reach an understanding. We may not agree on everything, but do we respect each other's freedom of choice, so long as we don't like try to impose our will over one another? That if that understanding reached more and more and more people, especially the agents of the state, the ones that defend the I would say corrupt elite or nefarious malevolent forces above, then this would just cease to exist. There doesn't need to be some violent revolution. The only reason that violence is still around is because people are still sucked into that mob mentality. They're not thinking for themselves. Like no sane person would get up and like fire their weapon and try to murder other people in cold blood that they've never met, never had a discussion with, don't know anything about, don't know their position. But this is what soldiers do, right? They're trained to go to another country and fire deadly weapons at people they've never met, that they may even like, love, get along with, hang out with, like you, or get along like you and I. I just met you, and this is seriously one of the best podcasts I've done. The other one is I'm going to introduce you to that guy. You guys will do a great one for sure. But that's why I also love this podcast, man. Like, you're highly informed, you understand what you're talking about, and you're open to new ideas. Or some people that just what was it? You were saying this earlier. I thought it was such a good point, Matt. Some people just can't believe that it's like it would be that bad, or that someone would do that. And we've heard this same saying, like, we see the world as we are, not as it is. So most people think because they would never do something nefarious that, well, our government officials wouldn't do that. Well, I wouldn't use heroin, but there are plenty of people using heroin. I wouldn't murder, but there are plenty of murderers. I wouldn't rape, but there are plenty of rapists, right? I wouldn't set policies that injure the elderly and the low income, but there are politicians that do this. I wouldn't do this or this or this for $1 million. That doesn't mean there aren't people doing that same thing for billions. It's so crazy that people can't understand this. I think it's a protective mechanism. They're like, oh, you're a conspiracy. That people have been conspiring together since the beginning of time. High school students in America, like, hey, I don't like Matt. Let's all not like Matt together for the most ridiculous reason, right? Now put trillions of dollars on the line, and I'll tell you what, let's do this and this together to ensure, like, it's not about, hey, let's all ignore Matt. It's something bigger. Like, people have been conspiring for a long, long time. There's nothing new. To deny it is absolute ignorance, man. By the etymology of the word, you are ignoring facts.
Yep. Yeah, I love that one. I learned that one from the Law Summit as well, because we go through the definitions. Is ignorance. You're just ignoring this. You're not addressing it. So how are we going to seek the truth? And the gun debate is a huge one, right? Because it goes back to war, and I never liked war. It doesn't make any sense. And I liked your point. I think it's the most valid one: is the government can't be the only one with the weapons, because they can't be trusted. Right. There's people that can't be trusted. That's the issue. I would love to see a world where it is peaceful. And my Native American teacher, what he said the next upgrade for humanity is peace. And I love that. And I love the day. Like, I don't have one. If I was in the States, right now I'd be happy to be living in the States with a Gatling gun and a bunch of grenades and a couple goats and, minding my own business. So you don't, take away my free will, which it seems like this, there's a certain set of people who want to do that. And you'll look at martial arts and warriors and just a good-natured human being. The last thing they want to do is move to violence.
Yeah.
Right. They don't want to be that person. Right. They're forced into that position. And this has happened over time. We have their circumstances over this world through history where the government has taken away the guns of the people and then massacred them. This has happened repeatedly. So we know we can't trust them, and we want to move toward these solutions. And we have to get rid of the government. We have to get rid of media. We have to get rid of all these institutions that are architecting these philosophies, worldviews, and ways of being that create harm. And how do we do that? No idea, but it starts at the individual choice. And then you meet with other people, and ideally you'll create your own solutions. But I don't think this is going to be like there's the World Health Organization that might have nefarious intent, and then the World Happiness Organization. I don't think we're going to have that. I think it's going to be a split where people do get to make their choice. And my kind of deduction for the whole thing is it's a spiritual life and it's a spiritual existence, and we can only play the first character, and we observe this thing that's so far beyond who we are and what we could even possibly comprehend. We're always learning and then shedding old things if you're willing to grow, learning new and coming to new paradigms. But like this greater thing, will you die on your car? Will you get a heart attack? Whatever, that's going to be something greater. So who are we through our choices, through how we observe, through how we operate, and through the decisions we make? And I feel like that's what's going to define, how we navigate this life and when we pass, because the greater thing is like, holy smokes, if I could, when I worked on human trafficking, if I could push the button to stop it, I would. It's so great and it's so atrocious and so awful. It's heartbreaking. If I could push the button on stopping war, I would do it. And it just makes you feel kind of helpless. But, I'm not creating this world. I can only bring the power back to my own world and the decisions that I make and what I choose to do with my life. Then I'm back into an empowered space, then a disempowered one being like, oh my goodness, it's so awful. I can barely even go on. And then you have the flip side where people just ignore the whole thing and they think everything's hunky dory and they're just participating in this thing through, ignorance and participation.
You said like you said, I can't create this news, but I think you are like that. I think you said, oh, we need to dismantle these things and these systems for everything to get better. I think like Buckminster Fuller said it best, like, we don't need to destroy that stuff. We just need to build something else. And like, as much as I would love to but I think it's more out of spite. Like, I would love to remove like some of these forms of government, remove these corrupt legacy media and so-called journalists, just remove these institutions. But ultimately, we don't need to remove them. We just need the freedom and the courage to build something in its place. Because if people are searching for certainty and they practice understanding, they're going to draw these conclusions anyway. They're going to be drawn to this anyway. They will leave that rotten fruit on the ground where it belongs. They will abandon, which, by the way, look at CNN. Their viewership is just gone. Like like you said, Project Veritas, that guy living in integrity, working, he's creating something. I think you're creating this podcast. I mean, come on, look at this. So, and it may not be like this world, but it's brick by brick. Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So I think you are creating something. I know when I wrote the book, I'm convinced I am. I know it's just not a revolution or anything, but it's just another brick in a great road for this new system. Like James O'Keefe's doing it. I'm trying to do it with the book and this, the Trivium. You're doing it with an amazing. This is a great podcast, by the way. You got a new listener, and I'll get you in touch. The guy, I don't know if I'll plug his thing on here if you want. It's up to you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't think you did, man. You're so like it'd be the same for him. It was, I forget. I think it was, The Fifth Dimension with Evan. I can't remember his last name right now, but it's called The Fifth Dimension with Evan. And he's got the same free form as you, and he's down all sorts of rabbit holes, and also a great, interesting dude, man. I want to tune into you guys having a chat. That for me would be fantastic, man.
Well, sounds good. I'll look him up after the show. And I really appreciate what you said at the end. Well, thanks for the kind words to me, but we're all doing our piece to build it. And that's what we are responsible for. You did that piece with your book and how you walk your life. It's an offering that will continue to, manifest in your way of being day to day, and something that people can pick up. You're kind of like, not making your mark in the stand, but standing for something, offering it to the world of what you're standing for and who you are and what you believe in. And that's all that's required is participation. And, for us to move towards peace and move towards solutions, it's going to require participation. And then also that understanding side of like this continuous listening and seeking the truth, not seeking to be right, but seeking the truth, seeking understanding. And when we do that, we're going to continue to evolve in beautiful ways. But if we try to enforce and stay the same and control things, it's not going to work for anyone. And I don't think, when I even think about that, there's no way that this works, because that never works. And your analogy of holding a ball under is just the most astute. I don't know.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Nature's, relevant or pertinent or concise. I don't know. So many different
all those words.
Words are important. But man, nature seeks balance. And right now it's definitely, we're living out of balance. And great. I don't know if you've ever read this book. I would recommend it too. Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it. I think I've heard of it.
Oh, bro, Matthew, you're going to love this book, man. It's probably, no one that I've recommended the book to and who's actually read it is like, it was okay. No, they all love it. It does such a good job of the discernment between nature and culture, and how far our culture is just so, at this point, it's so far removed from nature. This is the point he's making in the book, that there's no recourse at this point. It's just, we have to wait till utter collapse to build something new, is the case he makes. But it's also where I first heard the term mother culture. We're all familiar with the term mother nature, but when he brought up that, it's like, we're all born from nature, mother nature, but we're all adopted and raised by mother culture. Like, this is our adoptive parent or our adoptive mother. And that you'll love the book, and it's like an allegorical fiction. You'll love it. Daniel Quinn, 2 N's with the Quinn. Ishmael, so good, bro.
I appreciate that suggestion. I put it in the show notes where everybody else can check it out too. Man, this has been a pleasure. I could talk to you all day, and we'll definitely have to do another one. Is there anything else that you think is relevant? Anything that you want to discuss before we end this, and make sure where people can find you? But this has been great.
We'll pick it up on the next. Chatting with you is great, man. I wish you lived down the road from me, to be honest. I really do, man. You don't get these kind of conversations all the time. However, I'm sure you realize it with the podcast. Like the more we speak and talk about the things we know and understand, that we draw those people to us. So I really enjoy these kind of conversations. And more of them come to me when I'm brave enough to speak up and speak out. And you're, oh, I'm interested in that. And then you get people engaged and they have those discussions too. I'm sure that's the same as you. But anything else to talk about? My God, I think you and I could go probably another 4 hours. So I think we just pick it up on another call. If people want to know more about my book, it's real easy. You just go to restoringreason.com. That's it. And there you can download like the first chapter for free and see if it's for you. If not, cool. If so, then I think you can order it from that site too. And also, if anyone want to get in touch with me or have one of these great discussions, dude, I'm just looking forward to our next discussion. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, I appreciate your
talk
time.
about next time.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate your time and for taking action and writing the book. And I loved a lot of the analogies you share, but like doing each of our piece wherever we are, maybe it's just to be a good parent or a good member of our community, or there's something that inspires us to take action to create that solution that, you know, we're the most adaptive creatures in the world. And we have divine spark spirit within us where we're being led and we're being cooperative with nature and all of life, and things that are not cooperative with life and nature, they're the ones who end up getting harmed, maybe not in the short term, but in the long term. So I just appreciate everything you shared and invite people to check out your website and your book. And thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Matt, man. Take care, bud.
All right. My pleasure.